Hi, everybody. So I'm very happy to be speaking with you at the IBIL4 conference. My name is Selenite, and I am a poet, writer, performance artist, etc. And I'm very happy to share this talk with you today. And I'd also like to thank everyone at Trans H4CK, especially Courtney, for inviting me to be here with you today virtually. So I would like to introduce you to a different kind of technologist, which is a literary technologist. And this is a title that I have deemed myself. But when we think about the title of technologist, the terminology and the responsibility that comes with that, much of our personal imagery leads us to computers and electronics. Other images would include individuals whose jobs are to use technology to advance healthcare, education, and architecture, things like that. And it's because of events like this conference that we're in today that we're able to reconstruct and reclaim the work of technologists. And at this time, I'm going to explain my history with literary technology and my vision for its use in the present day and also the future. But first, I would like to share a poem with you that totally fits into what I'm getting ready to talk about. So this is a poem called Learning to Capture Fire. I was 19 when the teachers who taught me poetry verbally faxed to my psyche the realities of my complex multiple identities and sharing that story. I'm from Ghost Town. That's the name of my hood, also known where laziness was enacted after many memorandums to be bold slipped by. The playgrounds of Howell Park stretched my legs, yet forced masculinities on my shoulders. 5 blocks down Winburn Avenue, my neglect began at the elementary school. 6 blocks from home, the church sheltered my soul, influenced my verses as one-dimensional, inserted a dramatized Baptist tongue to always acknowledge the Holy Trinity, to accept the words scribed and read as right. This universe was severely colonized by diameter, and radii just as ignorance, resulting in a full socially ill circumference. Though my high school diploma determined the directions, or it was supposed to, it stopped here in my 20s. After flirting with void notebooks in different ink, artistic infidelity is a minefield from which escape is the fearless option. When they existed, I pulled all 132 dreadlocks back, questioning the consecutive sacrifices of craft for work. I spent more time in the hustle nature of a restaurant, memorizing orders of side salads with triple ramekins of ranch, more than crammed unfinished poems, pocketing dollars and callousing my feet until 3 a.m. I hail from somewhere other than a ghetto furnished to laugh at my gender presentation or to be confused when I speak. Though my body is familiar with victimization, waiting for someone to claim responsibility is waiting for an eclipse. Words are my choice to teach self-resurrection, to gather myself from remaining in a choir of despondency. Life doesn't succumb to family karma. It continues rising as dreams transplant themselves as missions, affirming, writing, and truth-telling as breathing. These are gospels for the canon-seeking mountains, bathed in the righteous assurance that one can sparkle from anywhere, and I am sparkling, dazzling, electrifying before myself, before you, before ancestors, before creation. My sparkle can't die, for it's sparkling like it's never sparkled. So that was Learning to Capture Fire, which is a poem that came from my debut poetry collection, which is titled Trigger. It was self-published in May of this year, so it's been out for a few months. So the overall story of Trigger and of these poems, along with the aspiration to birth a book into the world, it took, depending on which part of the process I can answer, but I always say it took me 2 to 5 years. And Trigger was written in both my hometown of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I'm also based here in DC. So the poems are written across those 2 locations. And it's a story about transition, of coming into oneself, about home, about finding home and transferring homes. And it's just about various experiences that were chosen to be executed through verse. And a lot of them have been performed in spoken word environments. And together, they are a collection of rants, hymns, joys, and anxieties of being a Black, queer, trans woman in 21st century America. And when it came to, to Trigger, I didn't only write it. I created the book cover, did formatting, did final edits with another trans woman writer. Her name is Jeannie Barreau. And I also organized it for final publication. It's self-published through the Create Space Independent platform, which is a company through Amazon. And I also spearheaded a social media campaign through Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So I was pretty much a one-woman orchestra. But prior to announcing this book, I was experiencing major issues with my laptop. And since I had sacrificed working a traditional 9-to-5 job to work on the book, I didn't have the finances to buy a new computer. It would cost me hundreds of dollars that I didn't have. I didn't have that lying around. So it took a few weeks before a Facebook friend messaged me to donate a refurbished $900 MacBook Air to continue my work. So Trigger, it wasn't just the literary and artistic contribution, the promotion and the monetary solidarity that came with that towards my living expenses. It was pretty much a strong community effort. And so the publication of this book, it made me the first Black trans woman as a Louisiana native to publish a full-length work of poetry. And this is an accomplishment that resides in my career as both a praise, but also a disappointment. And I'm getting ready to explain this. So Trigger, it joined this canon of literature by trans women of color, right? So we're talking works by many women that I know. My sister, Dane Figueroa Aditi, Joshua Jennifer Espinoza, Toni Newman, Luna Mabruja, Sharon Davis. But most notably, Sharon Davis, her out-of-print memoir, which is called A Finer Specimen of Womanhood. This became the first memoir published by a Black trans woman in 1986. So this means that since 1986, there have only been a handful of our published narratives. This means since 1986, erasure has been a frequent visitor of our history. So that 30 years later, and since the beginning of time, always, we trans women of color, we remain discouraged from publishing our own works through the mainstream publishing industry. And yes, one can say that, Janet Mock published Redefining Realness, which is a wonderful, wonderful memoir, but our existences, our experiences, our truths, those are heavily nuanced. And so we cannot stop at one book written by one person. We can't just have one resource. So this lack of archive is connected to the continuing genocide and the violence of our lives. And this is a fact. This is a fact. At least 20 trans and gender nonconforming people of color, mostly Black and Latina trans women, have been murdered by homicide and suicide in 2016. And we are on track to surpass last year's body count. So this violence and this genocide that we are experiencing in this country, it really plays a big role in how we document our history. So many trans women of color that I know, as sisters, as friends, as professional acquaintances, many of them have resorted to taking their work into their own hands, making zines, chapbooks, ebooks for digital download for whatever legitimate reason. Those reasons are very, very valid. But one thing that is absolutely clear is that popular and acclaimed publishing houses, no matter how great they are unwilling to offer proper resonance for our stories. So when I decided that it was time to publish Trigger, I made the conscientious decision to self-publish. And that meant controlling my own narrative, further establishing my platform, and really not waiting for someone, most likely a cis hetero person, most likely a white person, to hand me an opportunity. So Trigger is the song that Trigger is playing right now. It exists in 137 places, meaning that there's 137 copies of Trigger lying around the world, and it's counting. And where those 137 places are, those are places where the work can be continued. This work can go on, so that poetry by women like Vita Cleveland and Chrysanthemum Tran and Isabella X and J. Phoenix Martinez, the goddesses that I mentioned earlier, and all goddesses that I know, and goddesses who write and who have yet to start writing, can inherit and further build an audience. So this is a wonderful time in history because we're writing more than ever before. We're not the first to write. Before Trigger manifested, Trans women of color wrote poetry, fiction, memoirs, short stories, but we lack a historical documentation of these works. Because trans people of color have existed forever, there's a 100% guarantee that there are writers and poets and storytellers that are in those ancestral lineages. It's true. Our canon is very minuscule, it's very small. Our archive is very light compared to the amount of books written by cis people, which is still the overwhelming majority in every bookstore, library, and literary institution around the world. But with the power of social media and technology, we are better equipped to undertake this problem ourselves. All of us can be literary technologists if literature is something that you're very, very passionate about and that you want to see expand. So instead of waiting on answers to our demands from these violent places that seek to tokenize us, we must utilize the resources that we have in our communities to birth, raise, and to support writers. Community, whether for affirmation or constructive criticism of work, will always be a vital component. Many of us have relied on the internet for community. What I envision are poetry writing workshops to be held through applications such as Skype or Google Hangouts for trans women of color who may not be able to afford to attend a writer's retreat or residency. Women who may have intense anxiety from walking out of their homes. These workshops will enable us to not just create for quality, but also to create for therapy, to create from trauma. And it's very important that the goal is to create for archive. I envision more calls for submissions over the internet to anthologies centering and are also edited by trans women of color. I envision crowdfunding and ongoing demand for financial capital to fund our own online presses and publications, for trans women of color to be rightfully compensated for our craft with royalty checks that pay our rent and keep food in the cabinets. I envision a proper syllabus accessible to our trans children of color in places such as blogs and the iTunes store. And these are young people who as the years go by, they have become increasingly impressionable with technology. So this would be a syllabus serving as assurance or reassurance that literature can help them love themselves in a society that is beyond ready to dispose of them. So we can all be literary technologists. It's very, very possible. And that starts with supporting trans women of color writers in a multitude of revolutionary ways. And so that's pretty much my talk. That's pretty much what I wanted to talk about today. Thank you again for giving me this opportunity. And I think this is the perfect time for us to go into to Q&A. Okay. So what I'm going to do is what am I doing? I'm trying to find the chat panel. Oh, I see it. Okay, I blinked out for a second. Okay. Media space. Okay. Okay. All right. I see it. Okay. So while I'm waiting for a question, sure. So I know I'll piggyback on what I said. So I know so many of us trans women of color. A lot of us have a distrust of the publishing industry, and I think a big part of having lack of access to it or having the distrust is because we're so busy having to rely on ourselves, which is not a bad thing at all. But I think that it's for so many of us, we know that there's going to be if we submit our work to, let's say, a publishing company such as Random House or Atria, a lot of us feel, or at least I feel, let's say I should start using I statements. I feel that there would be some whitewashing or some cis washing. I feel that that the best way to get my work out in the world is to do everything myself. And so a lot of it is, I think a big part of the inaccessibility is not being told that you can write your own story. Not being told that you can be on someone's shelf. No, we're not told that. And affirmed in that way. So right now it's like, when I published my book, that was me saying, my sister can have a sister who can write a book too. You don't have to wait for somebody. So as I'm waiting on another question, I'm going to post the link to the book if you want to see the availability or to, just check it out. I'm going to post a link in the space right now. All right, it should be there. Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that the cover was going to show. Oh, cool. Okay, wonderful. Thanks, Courtney. Thank you. Yeah, it's. I just posted the link there. It's on CreateSpace. So you can go to createspace.com and search "Trigger" by Venus Selenite on the CreateSpace store. You can check it out on my Twitter at Venus Selenite. I'm always posting about it every day. There's links on my website, venusselenite.com. Oh, yeah. Tour plans, I can't. So right now, you would ask me these questions. So my tour plans right now, at this time, I'm currently open for bookings for both the current fall and spring semester. So if anyone's in college or they know of a literary place, a coffee house, bookstore, whatever, wherever, I'm currently taking bookings. I can be reached on Twitter. You can send your inquiries to Venus Selenite at gmail.com. So I'm very interested. I'm very excited. I got some stuff in the works. I can't really say anything about those yet, but I'm looking forward to stopping wherever I can. I also released a smaller collection of stuff from the vault called Stilettos, B poems, and B poems are poems that I call that were just in the vault. And that's also available on CreateSpace. So if you see Trigger, you'll also see Stilettos, and you can also find that on all over my social media.